Hello, my name is Carrie Mann and I'm with the ESL department. This webinar is intended to familiarize yourself with WIDA's 2012 Amplification of the English Language Development Standards, which incorporates the Common Core as well as augmenting the ELD framework with several other elements you'll see today. It will be helpful to have your own copy of the 2012 Amplification on hand for reference as we go on through the presentation. The 2012 Amplification of the ELD standards should be used in addition to, not in place of, the 2007 English Language Proficiency Standards. The 2007 ELP remains in place as the core of our curriculum.
Hey everybody, this is Holly Mayville. On page 3 of your 2012 Amplification book, we revisit the WIDA conception of standards. If the core goal of the English language development is achieving facility with English necessary to engage successfully with peers, educators, and curriculum in the school setting, then the next logical division is into the standards, or the 5 academic areas in which students must apply their proficiency: social instructional language, the language of language arts, the language of mathematics, the language of science, and the language of social studies. Again, the core of English language development is to develop facility with academic language. Academic language is then divided into 5 standards representing the core disciplines as well as social instructional language. The language of all these standards is experienced and produced through the 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In the English language development, each domain and its features are addressed within each standard. English language proficiency is a continuum that extends from a new arrival's complete lack of English to the final goal of fluency. Research shows that on average it takes a student 5 to 7 years to achieve complete fluency. So here we have the WIDA levels of English language proficiency. WIDA divides the continuum into 6 levels, and it helps, although it's not always completely accurate, to think of each level as representing roughly a year of progress. Level 6, reaching, is considered equivalent to the proficiency of a native English speaker on grade level. So, the 5 standards have 4 domains, and then we have the 6 levels.
This slide shows how the proficiency levels apply to the performance expectations. This strand has the same domain, writing, and cognitive function, analyzing, throughout, but the expectations for how the student uses language varies. At level 1, the student labels, producing language in single words or short phrases. At level 2 and 3, the student describes, which requires production of sentences. Level 4 asks students to discuss, which is language production at the paragraph level, and then level 5 asks students to reproduce stories, which is the most linguistically demanding task on the strand. English language development, or ELD, standards are designed to support state standards, but it's important to remember that these standards measure very different things, and that any individual student can be performing at a very high level in one while still operating at a very low level in the other. ELD standards measure language development, while state standards, in our case the North Carolina adaptation of the Common Core, measures academic achievement and content. The ELD standards reflect the stages of language acquisition, while the state standards reflect conceptual development. The ELD standards support language performance within a school, social, and academic environment, while content standards support the academic curriculum. Finally, you'll generally hear our ELD standards referred to as the WIDA standards, while of course the content standards are referred to as the Common Core. As students venture into various academic environments, the nature of the language they need for success changes significantly, hence the acknowledgement within the WIDA framework of different academic contexts. such as the language of math versus the language of language arts. Note here that music and computer science are also shown, and the 2012 amplification addresses these non-core areas for the first time as well. More on that in a little bit. Another key element of this graphic is how all of the academic and social language used in the school context is underpinned by a foundation formed by home and community language and cultural factors, which are critical effectors of school performance for English speakers and English learners alike. The core of the ELD standards is development of academic language, which is defined clearly here. Academic language refers to the abilities to construct meaning from oral and written language, relate complex ideas and information, recognize features of different genres, and use various linguistic strategies to communicate. As we delve deeper into the framework, you will see how all the elements point back to supporting this core definition.
This is page 7 of your 2012 amplification. Teaching and assessing language requires a clear and concrete terminology of its own. This graphic breaks down the core idea of academic language into measurable features that are easier to isolate and evaluate. Language can be evaluated on 3 different levels. Looking at a language product as a whole is evaluating it on the discourse level. Focusing in more tightly, we can evaluate at the sentence level. The highest level of magnification focuses then on the word phrase level. At the discourse level, we assess the overall amount, structure, and density of the text, the organization and cohesion of ideas, and the variety of sentence types. At the sentence level, we're analyzing the grammar, fluency, and mechanics, and the appropriateness of the language in the context. At the word phrase level, we're assessing the specificity and quality of the word choice in terms of meaning and register. Something new to note here is WIDA's emphasis on the importance of context to evaluating quality of language. Are the register and genre appropriate to the topic, task, and social roles and identities of the participants? On page 8, we go further into performance definitions, focusing here on the receptive domains of listening and reading, and specifying what performance expectations are germane to each proficiency level. Those of you who have administered and scored the WAPT or the speaking portion of the access test will recognize how these 3 levels, discourse, sentence, and word, define different aspects of performance within a particular level. As you can see, the performance definitions for a level 1 are very basic, and the language rigor increases steadily as we progress toward level 5. On page 9, we see the performance definitions for the productive domains, speaking and writing, laid out in exactly the same way. Note at the bottom of both pages you see within sociocultural contexts for language use, which again refers to WIDA's new emphasis on guiding students toward proper use of register and genre depending on the situation and audience of the task.
Now we will look at strands of model performance indicators that are specifically addressing grade levels, content topics, and language domains to see how the WIDA framework guides our development of language objectives. Never forget that the WIDA ELD standards is not a set curriculum, but rather a guide for developing appropriate objectives that bring students closer to needed academic language proficiency. The slide we see here reproduces page 71 in your 2012 amplification guide. This page models reading performance indicators appropriate for 4th graders exploring narration and language arts. You can see the linguistic complexity of the task as escalates as we move through the proficiency levels from identify to categorize to compare. While the core topic, narrative points of view, remains the same. Also changing throughout the strand is the level of support offered during the performance of the task. The complexity of the text changes from illustrated text to extended text, and the instructional supports start with word phrase banks and partners and then move on to graphic organizers to finally no instructional support at all at a level 5. So far, all of this should be pretty familiar to folks who have been using the WIDA framework over the past few years. Now let's look at what's on the page that's new. First, there's the connection, which links the topic and tasks directly to the Common Core. And next, we see the example context for language use, which lays out exactly how the model strand below might look in application in a classroom lesson. Then we see the cognitive function. We always want to be supporting use of higher level thinking skills, and the first step is to be aware of which skills will be in play in a particular activity. Here, WIDA works to keep the rigor high by emphasizing the higher level skills such as analyzing. And you can see how each MPI does require the cognitive function of analysis despite the great variation of language rigor across the strand. Finally, we have the topic-related language, which offers the academic vocabulary appropriate to the topic, along with a reminder that students at all 5 levels need to learn it. What's cool about these additions is that they provide just that many more tools for your effective lesson planning. On pages 15 and 16 of your 2012 amplification, you will find tools to help you develop your own MPIs and strands as appropriate to the needs of your students and the topics they are studying. This slide also offers some helpful advice about the realities of differentiation. When addressing a whole class, it may not always be possible to adjust language to each student's listening proficiency level. For example, students at all levels of language proficiency can learn from video or other presentations when given adequate support, and this amplified strand models how a teacher might scaffold the use of such audiovisual materials. In this amplified strand, only 3 full examples of the teacher's oral discourse are given, as it is assumed that educators would select which level language discourse to use based on the range of language proficiency profiles of students in the classroom. In other words, if the class has several beginning L's, the educator would follow the linguistic and supporting features shown next to linguistic complexity for levels 1 through 3. On the other hand, if the class consists of primarily non-L's and some L's who are nearing exit from language support programs, the levels 3 through 5 example is the most logical model to follow. Many classes will fall somewhere in the middle or consist of a full range of proficiency levels. In such cases, the use of instructional assistants or co-teachers allows grouping of students so that they are given appropriate support. Note how the content presented does not vary from level to level, but the support and language input does.
In the 2007 ELP, the pages of MPIs look like this. One box contains an MPI, which then fits within a strand of MPIs that all address the same topic, the same cognitive function, and similar but progressively more difficult language functions. A list of helpful supports can be found on page 11 of the 2012 amplification. As you are developing lesson plans that implement the Common Core, this can assist you in planning and differentiating activities across the proficiency levels. Treat this as a jumping-off point, as your supports need not be limited to those listed here. As mentioned earlier, the 2012 amplification also acknowledges the need for academic language in disciplines beyond the 4 core courses. Disciplines such as music and the performing arts, humanities, visual arts, health and physical education, and technology and engineering. You will find sample complementary strands at the end of each grade level in the 2012 amplification. Thank you for listening. The ESL Student Education Department is always on hand to support your understanding of the WIDA ELD standards. Please contact Carrie or myself anytime if you have questions, comments, or concerns.